Rain had begun to drizzle over the quiet streets of Gangnam, the city's neon lights reflecting off slick asphalt like liquid gold. Arya, a shy young woman with ebony skin and a quiet presence, clutched her umbrella tighter as she made her way down the narrow alley. Her breath came in short, nervous puffs, her mind racing over the mistake she'd just made. Earlier that evening, she had been rushing home from her part-time job at a small cafe, balancing a tray of pastries for a customer who had insisted on buying them for charity. She had been distracted, her mind wandering, when she accidentally bumped into a parked car. Not just any car, an immaculate, glossy black sports car that gleamed even under the dim streetlights. She had frozen, heart pounding, as she saw the scratch her umbrella handle had caused along the side panel. She panicked, taking out her small notebook and scribbling an apology. "I am so sorry for scratching your car. It was an accident, and I will do whatever it takes to make it right. Please forgive me. Arya." With a trembling hand, she slipped the note under the windshield wiper and ran off before anyone could see her. Arya didn't know then that the car belonged to Minsik, a man whose name commanded respect and fear across Seoul's underworld. At 50, Minsik was the head of a powerful Korean Mafia syndicate, a man whose life balanced on strategy, precision, and an iron will. But even someone so feared had a private side, a side only a few ever glimpsed, and tonight, that side would be stirred. Minsik had returned to his car after a late dinner meeting, expecting to drive to his office for final paperwork. The scratches glimmered under the rain, a thin line marring his otherwise perfect vehicle. He frowned, his dark eyes narrowing. Then he saw the note. "I am so sorry for scratching your car. It was an accident, and I will do whatever it takes to make it right. Please forgive me. Arya." He tilted his head, reading the handwriting. It wasn't a threatening note, and it didn't reek of fear or guilt. It was shy, hesitant, almost endearing. Minsik was intrigued, the smallest smile tugging at the corners of his mouth. He had never received an apology like this before. Meanwhile, Arya sat in her tiny apartment above the cafe, replaying the incident over and over in her head. Her cheeks burned as she imagined Minsik discovering the scratch, imagining his anger, imagining the worst. I shouldn't have left a note," she muttered, biting her lip. But it was too late now. The next morning, she walked to the cafe expecting nothing less than a furious confrontation. She was shocked when the bell above the door jingled and Minsik stepped inside. He looked different up close, less the fearsome mafia boss she had imagined, and more a man who carried an air of authority with quiet confidence. His tailored suit clung perfectly to his frame, his movements controlled and precise. Yet when his gaze landed on her, she felt an odd flutter in her chest, a mix of fear and curiosity. "Arya," he said, his voice smooth and low yet not intimidating. "Just magnetic. You left this on my car last night?" She swallowed hard, nodding, words failing her. Her hands twisted the strap of her apron, and her heart raced. I'm so sorry. Didn't mean—" "You didn't have to run," he interrupted gently. "Most people would have just left and hoped for the best. But you took responsibility." Arya blinked. I just didn't want to get in trouble." Minsik's lips curved into a faint smile. "Responsibility is rare these days. Most people avoid it, especially when fear is involved. You're unusual, Arya." The compliment, simple as it was, made her cheeks burn hotter. She managed a shy nod, unsure what to say. Over the next few days, Minsik found reasons to visit the cafe. He didn't demand payment for the scratch. He didn't yell or threaten. Instead, he ordered coffee, pastries, sometimes lingering longer than necessary, watching her move between tables with quiet fascination. Arya, in turn, found herself both terrified and curious about him. He was powerful, yes, but also patient, kind in a way that contrasted sharply with the stories she had heard about him. One rainy afternoon, as Arya washed cups behind the counter, Minsik leaned against it, hands folded, watching her. The cafe was empty except for the soft hum of the espresso machine. "You work very hard," he said, his tone gentle. Do you enjoy it?" Arya paused, scrubbing a stubborn stain on a cup. I like it, most days. It helps me feel like I'm doing something right." She hesitated, then added softly, "I also like seeing people smile when I serve them." Minsik nodded. "Good. That matters more than most people realize. Their eyes met briefly, and something unspoken passed between them. A warmth, an understanding, a curiosity that neither could ignore. Days turned into weeks, and their encounters became a quiet rhythm. Minsik would appear just when Arya least expected him, and she would find herself anticipating it. He never forced her into conversation, never overstepped boundaries, yet his presence lingered in her thoughts long after he left. Then one evening, as the cafe was closing, Minsik handed her a small envelope. Arya opened it hesitantly. Inside was a gift card for a luxurious spa in the heart of Seoul, with a handwritten note. "For the woman who left me a note that I will never forget. Please accept this, not as repayment, but as a token of my admiration. M." Arya's hands shook. I can't accept this," she whispered. "Why not?" he asked softly, leaning closer. "Because you feel undeserving? Or because you're afraid of me?" She looked up at him, heart pounding. "A little of both," she admitted, voice barely above a whisper. Minsik smiled, that same faint smile that seemed to make everything around him sharper, brighter, warmer. "Fear isn't always bad," he said. "Sometimes it leads to something unexpected." And at that moment, Arya realized that the scratch, the note, the awkwardness of that rainy night had changed everything. She had unknowingly stepped into a world she didn't understand, and yet, for the first time in her life, she felt something fluttering in her chest that was bigger than fear, bigger than uncertainty. Something like hope. Minsik straightened, tipping his head toward the door. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said. And just like that, he was gone, leaving Arya alone with her thoughts and a strange, warming anticipation for the future. The city continued to hum outside, rain slicking the streets and neon lights reflecting in every puddle. But inside Arya's small cafe, a quiet, tender storm had begun. The next morning, Arya arrived at the cafe earlier than usual. The streets were wet from last night's rain, and the air smelled faintly of wet asphalt and jasmine from the nearby florist. Her heart was still fluttering from the memory of Minsik's visit the previous evening. She tried to focus on brewing coffee and arranging pastries, but her hands trembled slightly as she set cups on the counter. She heard the familiar chime of the cafe door and looked up. Minsik had arrived again, his tailored coat glistening with raindrops, his dark eyes scanning the room until they found her. He gave her a small nod, a quiet acknowledgement that made her chest tighten. "Good morning, Arya," he said, his voice calm but carrying an undercurrent of warmth. "Good morning," she replied softly, her voice barely audible over the espresso machine. He walked past the counter and ordered a black coffee. No sugar, no milk. Then instead of retreating to a corner table, he stayed nearby, leaning slightly against the counter, observing her movements. There was an intensity in his gaze, not menacing, but curious, probing. Do you live around here?" he asked suddenly, breaking the silence. Arya nodded, setting down a tray of pastries. "Yes, not far, just a small apartment above the bookstore down the street." She hesitated, unsure if she should share more. "It's quiet and affordable." Minsik's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Quiet can be good, peaceful. Sometimes we need that more than we realize." Arya's hands paused mid-motion. There was something about the way he spoke, something that felt more like concern than authority. She wondered for a fleeting moment if people ever saw this side of him, a man who commanded respect, feared by many, yet here he was, gentle, unobtrusive, almost human. Their morning routine continued quietly, each finding comfort in the simple rhythm, but Arya could feel an invisible tension simmering underneath, the unspoken acknowledgement that their worlds were different. One small, ordinary, and careful, the other powerful, dangerous, and unpredictable. Days passed. Minsik's visits became more frequent, though never overbearing. He asked about her day, her dreams, and sometimes, when she least expected it, he would share small stories from his own life, stories that revealed fragments of a man hidden beneath the aura of authority. He spoke of a childhood spent learning the importance of discipline, of nights spent studying business rather than playing outside, of friendships lost to ambition and duty. Arya listened, fascinated, yet cautious. She wanted to reach out, to touch that humanity he revealed in whispers, but she couldn't forget who he was, the mafia boss of Seoul, a man with power enough to crush enemies with a single decision, a man whose life she barely understood. And yet, every time he smiled softly at her, something in her chest uncoiled, a tiny thread of trust weaving between them. One evening, after closing the cafe, Arya walked home under the dim glow of streetlights. The city felt different in the quiet, as if it were holding its breath. She carried a small bouquet of wildflowers she had bought from a street vendor, thinking they might brighten her apartment. As she turned the corner toward her building, a sleek black car pulled up beside her. Minsik stepped out, hands in his pockets. "You're walking alone?" he said, his voice neutral, but she could detect a faint note of concern. I don't mind," she said softly, clutching the flowers. He regarded her for a moment, then nodded. "Good. Walk with me then. It's better than alone." They walked side by side, neither speaking for a few blocks. The rain had returned in light droplets, misting the air and dampening the streets. Arya noticed how different Seoul felt at night when it was quiet. Less crowded, less loud, almost intimate. "Do you ever feel like life moves too fast?" she asked suddenly, surprising herself with her boldness. Minsik glanced at her, intrigued. "Sometimes, but I've learned to slow down when necessary. Moments like these, they matter more than the rest of the world might believe." Arya's heart fluttered. She hadn't expected him to answer so honestly. I I often feel like I'm invisible," she admitted. "Like no one really notices the small things I do." Minsik's gaze softened. "Invisible? You? Never." He paused, studying her expression. "The world tends to overlook quiet people, yes, but I notice you. Always." The words made her stop mid-step. Her pulse quickened, and she felt a warmth spreading through her chest, as if the cold drizzle around them couldn't touch her. She looked down at the flowers in her hands, suddenly aware that she hadn't held them this tightly in her life. "You notice me," she whispered, almost afraid to hear the answer. "Yes," he said simply. "More than you realize." They continued walking in silence, a subtle connection threading between them. Arya realized that she wasn't scared anymore, not of the streets, not of the rain, not even of the man walking beside her. There was something tender in the way he moved, something protective but not controlling, and it made her feel seen in a way that was almost overwhelming. As they approached her building, Minsik stopped. "Tomorrow," he said, "I want you to join me for dinner, somewhere quiet. No obligations, just us talking." Arya blinked, startled. "Dinner? With you?" He gave a faint smile. "Yes, if you'd like, no pressure." She nodded, unsure what to say. Her mind raced, imagining the possibilities. A quiet dinner with Minsik, an invitation to see him beyond the shadows of his reputation. And somewhere deep inside, she felt a flicker of hope, a sense that her world might be expanding in ways she hadn't dared to imagine. That night, Arya lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The scratches on the car, the note she had left, the timid apology, it had all led to this. She realized that sometimes mistakes weren't just accidents. Sometimes they were opportunities, strange twists of fate that pushed life forward in unexpected ways. And in that quiet room, she felt a curious warmth, a sense that something new and delicate was beginning. Something like love. The evening of their dinner arrived, and Arya's nerves were in full bloom. She had spent hours deciding what to wear, settling finally on a modest but elegant dress in deep navy, the color complementing her skin. Her hair was loosely curled, and she had applied the faintest touch of makeup, just enough to feel presentable without feeling like she was hiding behind it. The restaurant Minsik had chosen was tucked away in a quiet street of Gangnam, far from the busy nightlife and curious onlookers. The exterior was unassuming, with a simple wooden door and warm lights glowing behind frosted glass. Inside, the decor was minimal but refined, soft jazz playing in the background, polished wooden tables, and candlelight that flickered gently across the walls. Arya arrived early, her hands trembling slightly as she tucked the strap of her purse under her arm. She was relieved when she saw Minsik already seated at a table near the corner, his posture relaxed, his presence commanding, but not intimidating. When their eyes met, he gave a small nod of acknowledgement that made her chest flutter. "Good evening, Arya," he said as she approached. His tone was gentle, yet there was an unmistakable weight to it, a subtle reminder that he was not an ordinary man. "Good evening," she replied softly, lowering herself into the chair across from him. For a moment, neither spoke, both taking in the ambiance, the soft glow of the candles, the quiet murmur of other diners. Then Minsik leaned slightly forward, resting one hand on the table. "I'm glad you came," he said simply. Arya's lips curved into a small, nervous smile. I I wasn't sure I should. I didn't want to intrude." "You're not intruding," he assured her. "I invited you, that's different." She nodded, feeling a warm flutter in her chest, and there was something about the way he said it, the subtle emphasis on the word invited, that made her feel valued, seen, almost safe. They ordered dinner, Minsik suggesting dishes with quiet confidence, explaining each one with a mix of knowledge and casual charm. Arya found herself relaxing, listening to him talk about flavors, ingredients, and small anecdotes from his life that revealed a side of him the world rarely saw. He spoke of rare trips abroad, of quiet moments spent reading or walking through the city alone, and of lessons learned from both success and failure. As they ate, Arya found herself laughing quietly at one of his stories, a rare sound that seemed to surprise both of them. Minsik's eyes softened when he saw it, and for a moment, he looked less like the formidable mafia boss the city whispered about, and more like a man who simply enjoyed the company of someone who could see him, truly see him. "You have a gentle heart," he said at one point, his voice low and earnest. "You notice things most people overlook. That's rare." Arya felt her cheeks warm. I I try," she admitted, looking down at her plate. "It's not always easy, though. Sometimes I feel like I'm too quiet, too small to matter." "You matter," he said firmly, "more than you realize. That note you left on my car, it spoke volumes about you, about courage, honesty, responsibility. Most people would have run, but you didn't." She looked up at him, startled by his intensity. There was something in his gaze that went beyond simple words, a sincerity, a quiet admiration that made her heart race. I I didn't think anyone would notice," she whispered. "I did," he said, his tone soft but unwavering. "And I've been noticing ever since." For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the gentle hum of conversation around them and the faint clinking of cutlery. Arya felt a connection forming, fragile but undeniable. It was the kind of connection that didn't need grand gestures or declarations, just presence, attention, and understanding. After dinner, they walked through the quiet streets of Gangnam, the city lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Arya felt a strange sense of peace walking beside him, a sense that despite the world outside, this moment was entirely their own. "You know," Minsik said after a pause, "I've met many people in my life. Some I trusted, some I feared, some I admired, but you're different." Arya glanced at him, unsure how to respond. "Different?" "Yes," he said simply. "You're genuine. You're not trying to impress anyone, not hiding behind masks. And that is rare and important." Her chest tightened, and she felt a shy smile tug at her lips. I, I'm glad you think so." They reached a small park on the way back to her apartment. The fountain was lit with soft lights, water cascading gently into the basin. The quiet hum of the city was distant here, muted, and for a moment it felt like they were in a world of their own. Minsik stopped, turning to face her. "I want you to know," he said, "that I'm not like everyone else. My life is complicated and sometimes dangerous. I won't hide that from you." Arya felt a flicker of fear, but it was tempered by curiosity. I I understand," she said softly. "I want to." He studied her for a moment, his gaze intense but not threatening. "Good," he said finally, "because I want you in my life. Not just tonight, not just for a dinner, but as someone I can trust, someone I can care for." Her breath caught. The words were simple, but the weight behind them was immense. She felt a warmth spreading through her chest, a mixture of fear and excitement, trust and wonder. I care for you too," she admitted quietly, her voice trembling slightly. I just didn't know how to say it. Minsik's eyes softened, and for the first time that evening, his full smile appeared. Small, almost shy, but genuine. Then you've said it now, he said. And that's enough. They stood there for a long moment, the fountain bubbling between them, the city around them forgotten. There was no rush, no pressure, just the quiet understanding that something new, fragile, and extraordinary was beginning. When Arya finally turned to leave, Minsik gave her a gentle nod. Tomorrow, he said, I'll see you again. She nodded, a shy smile on her face. Yes, tomorrow. And as she walked into her building, heart still fluttering, she realized that the scratch on the car, the note, and the timid apology had led her here, not just to dinner, but to the beginnings of a connection that neither fear nor circumstance could diminish. The following week carried a quiet tension. Arya noticed how her thoughts lingered on Minsik long after he had left the cafe, and even her coworkers began teasing her gently about her distracted behavior. She smiled awkwardly, deflecting their curiosity, but inside, her heart raced each time the door chimed with the arrival of a customer. Minsik, for his part, continued to appear at the cafe at unexpected moments. He never overstayed his welcome, but the mere sight of him, the sharp cut of his suit, the calm authority in his presence, made her pulse quicken. It was as if the world had subtly rearranged itself around him, a gravitational pull she couldn't ignore. Then came the day the complication arrived. Arya was closing up the cafe when she noticed a sleek black car pulling up across the street. She froze, recognizing it instantly, the very same car she had scratched weeks ago. Her stomach knotted. For a moment, she considered ducking inside the storage room until the driver left, but then she realized the car's owner was stepping out. Minsik. He walked toward her, umbrella in hand, and for the first time, Arya felt something unfamiliar. A flicker of fear, not for herself, but for the fragile connection that had been building. Arya, he said, his voice calm but firm, I need to speak with you. Can we walk? She nodded, swallowing hard, and followed him into the nearby park. The city's usual hum was muted here, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the occasional bark of a dog in the distance. Is everything okay? She asked hesitantly. He paused, studying her, and then spoke. There are things in my life that are complicated. You've seen pieces of who I am, the softer side, the side that exists outside my work. But my world isn't always gentle. Sometimes, it can be dangerous. Arya felt a chill, her fingers tightening around the strap of her bag. I know, she whispered. I don't mind. He shook his head slightly, a wry smile tugging at his lips. You shouldn't have to understand, and yet, I can't keep you out of it entirely. There are things I must handle, things that could touch you if you aren't careful. That's why I need to know if you're truly willing to be part of my life, knowing what it entails. Her heart raced. She had expected this, feared it, and yet she also knew her answer. I want to be, she said, her voice trembling but firm. Even if it's dangerous? Minsik studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes reflecting the flickering streetlights. You're brave, he said softly. Braver than most people I know. And yet, I can't ask you to be reckless for me. I need you to stay safe. Promise me that. Arya nodded, a strange mixture of fear and excitement churning inside her. I promise, she said. He reached out, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. The touch was brief, almost casual, yet it sent a shiver through her. Good, he said quietly. Then we moved forward, carefully, but together. Over the next few days, their interactions grew more personal. Minsik would ask about her dreams, her family, her favorite books, and music. He shared more of himself too. Childhood memories, favorite meals, fleeting moments of vulnerability that few had ever seen. Arya found herself opening up in ways she hadn't imagined possible, revealing parts of herself she usually kept hidden. One rainy afternoon, she was walking home from the cafe when she saw him waiting outside, leaning casually against his car. The rain had softened into a mist, and the streets glimmered in the muted light of neon signs. Hello, he greeted, his voice low, calm. Hello, she replied softly, adjusting her umbrella. You're soaked, he noted, stepping closer. Come with me. I have something to show you. Curious, she followed. He drove them to a small, quiet gallery tucked away in a side street. Inside, the gallery was filled with paintings, sculptures, and photographs, an intimate collection that seemed to reflect Minsik's private tastes. He walked her slowly through the exhibits, explaining the stories behind the pieces, and Arya noticed the careful attention in his gestures, the way he wanted her to see the world through his eyes. This is beautiful, she said quietly, moving closer to a painting of a misty forest. You have a very different side. Minsik smiled faintly. Not different, just private, something few are allowed to see. But I want you to see it. I want you to understand it. She looked up at him, and for the first time, she noticed the softness in his expression, a vulnerability that seemed at odds with the rumors she had heard of his power. I'm honored, she whispered. He reached for her hand, brushing it gently with his fingers. The warmth of his touch lingered, and for a moment they stood in quiet connection, surrounded by the art and the faint scent of oil paint and wood. Arya, he said softly, his eyes meeting hers. These past weeks have been unexpected, but I'm glad you're here, and I hope you feel the same. Her heart pounded. I do, she admitted, her voice trembling. I feel everything. Minsik's lips curved into a genuine smile, rare and disarming. Then we'll see where this path leads, he said quietly, carefully, but together, always together. As they left the gallery, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening under the city lights. Arya felt a mixture of exhilaration and serenity. She knew the world she had stepped into was complex and sometimes dangerous, but she also knew that with him, she felt seen, valued, and alive. And somewhere deep in her heart, she realized that the scratch on the car, the timid note, and her nervous courage had brought her here, not just to Minsik, but to a life that felt larger, richer, and more vibrant than anything she had ever imagined. The next morning, Arya woke to sunlight spilling through her window, the city below alive with the usual rhythm of cars, footsteps, and distant chatter. Her thoughts, as always, drifted to Minsik. She remembered the gallery, the quiet moments, his gentle touch. For the first time in a long while, her chest felt light, and she carried a sense of anticipation rather than fear. At the cafe, she moved through her morning routine with a calm focus. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee filled the air, and the soft chatter of the few early customers provided a comforting backdrop. She arranged pastries with care, her mind drifting to the conversation she and Minsik had shared the night before. The door chimed, and her heart jumped. There he was, standing in the doorway with his usual composed demeanor, dark suit gleaming even under the morning light, and that faint, inscrutable smile playing at his lips. "Good morning," he said, his voice calm but warm. "Good morning," she replied, her voice slightly breathless, a shy smile tugging at her lips. He walked over and ordered his usual coffee, lingering near the counter, as he had done so many times before. Today, however, there was something different, a quiet purpose in his presence. He studied her as she moved, carefully observing the smallest details. "You're calm today," he noted, his voice soft. "I think I am," she admitted. "I've been thinking about everything, about you, about us, and I feel safe." Minsik's eyes softened. "Safe? With me?" "Yes," she whispered. "For the first time, I feel seen and understood and not alone. I know your world is complicated and sometimes dangerous, but with you, I feel like I can be myself." He studied her, the faintest smile tugging at his lips. "That means more to me than you can imagine." He paused, then leaned slightly closer, his tone serious but tender. "Arya, these past weeks have been unexpected, but you've shown courage, honesty, and warmth, qualities I rarely encounter. I care for you, truly, and I want you to know that despite everything, I am here for you, always." Her heart pounded. The intensity in his gaze, the sincerity in his words made her feel both exhilarated and grounded. I care for you too, she said softly, her voice trembling slightly. More than I expected I could. He reached out, gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. Then we move forward, he said quietly, carefully, but together. We will navigate this world, yours, mine, and everything in between, side by side. Arya nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her chest that she had never known before. Together, she echoed, days turned into weeks, and their connection deepened. Minsik continued to visit the cafe, not just as a customer, but as a companion, sharing quiet conversations, laughter, and moments of reflection. Arya found herself opening up more, revealing her hopes, fears, and small joys. Minsik, in turn, shared glimpses of his private world, the careful balancing of power and responsibility, the rare moments of solitude, and the few people he truly trusted. One evening, as the city lights reflected off rain-slick streets, Minsik invited Arya for a walk along the Han River. The air was crisp, the soft glow of street lamps casting reflections on the water. They walked side by side, a comfortable silence settling between them. You've changed my perspective, Minsik said quietly. Before, I believed that trust was a luxury I couldn't afford. But with you, I've realized that it's worth taking the risk, that caring for someone is not weakness, it's strength. Arya looked up at him, her heart swelling. And you've changed mine, she admitted. I've learned that even in a world that feels intimidating or overwhelming, there's room for connection, for trust, for love. He stopped walking and turned to face her fully. The city hummed around them, but in that moment it felt as if they were the only two people in existence. Arya, he said softly, I want you to know something important. No matter what challenges come, no matter the dangers, I will always protect you, value you, and care for you. You've become essential to me in ways I didn't anticipate, and I can't imagine my life without you in it. Tears pricked at the corners of her eyes, and she felt her chest tighten with emotion. I feel the same, she whispered, reaching out to take his hand. His fingers closed over hers, strong yet gentle, grounding her in a way that words could not. For a long moment, they simply stood there, hands entwined, hearts beating in quiet harmony. The river flowed beside them, the city lights shimmering like tiny stars reflected on the water. In that space, there was no fear, no doubt, just a profound sense of understanding, trust, and the beginnings of love. As the night deepened, Minsik leaned slightly closer. Shall we walk a bit further? He asked, his voice soft, teasing just enough to make her laugh. Yes, she said, smiling through the lingering emotion. Let's. They continued along the river, speaking softly, laughing gently, and sharing stories that neither had told anyone else. Each step was a quiet affirmation of their growing bond. A bond forged through chance, courage, and the smallest act of honesty, a note on a scratched car. By the time they returned to her apartment, the city had quieted, and a gentle fog hugged the streets. Minsik paused at the door, looking at her with a mixture of admiration and tenderness. Good night, Arya, he said softly. Good night, she replied, feeling a profound sense of peace. Thank you. For everything. He smiled faintly. No, thank you. For trusting me, for being you. Tomorrow, and every day after, we'll continue this journey together. As he walked away, Arya closed the door behind her, leaning against it for a moment. She reflected on how a single, nervous note, written in haste, left in fear, had changed the course of her life. It had introduced her to someone she would come to trust, admire, and love. A man whose world was as dangerous as it was fascinating, and whose heart, as she now knew, was capable of tenderness and loyalty. Sitting by her window, Arya gazed out at the city lights, her heart full. The scratches on the car, the timid apology, the nervous courage that led her to act honestly. These small moments had sparked something extraordinary, and as she finally let herself relax, she realized that love, unexpected and unassuming, had found its way into her life. She smiled, feeling the warmth linger long after Minsik's footsteps faded into the night. For the first time, she truly believed that the world was larger, richer, and more beautiful than she had ever imagined. And she knew with certainty that whatever challenges came, They would face them together. In the heart of Seoul, amidst the neon lights and the quiet streets, two unlikely souls had found each other, by accident, by courage, and by the smallest act of honesty that had forever changed both of their lives. And so, under the vast sky, a shy black girl and a powerful man with a complicated world began their journey, side by side, hearts entwined, trust building, and love quietly, steadily growing